Welcome to Legal Marketing Happy Hour.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Legal Marketing Happy Hour, where we serve up tactical marketing insights that help law firms grow smarter, faster, and more profitably. Today's guest is Steve Stoff. He's the Senior Marketing Consultant at Above the Bar Marketing, and I'm Sean O'Connor. And today, Steve and I are going to break down which marketing metrics actually matter for law firms, which ones don't, and how to tell if your marketing is truly working. Important stuff. Hi, Steve.
Hey, good morning, Sean.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I love this subject. The whole, the old bromide. If I knew which half of my marketing or advertising dollars were working, I'd choose that. But you don't know sometimes. I know law firms are getting reports, right, filled with data every month. State of the art metrics. Which metrics tend to get the most attention, even though they don't really reflect whether the firm is growing? Are there kind of some red herring metrics out there?
Yeah, I think two of the biggest ones that we come across are like just the volume of website traffic a firm is getting.
Yeah, lots of people.
Right. And, I kind of relate that to a restaurant. Yeah, lots of cars drive by your restaurant, but how many people stop in and buy lunch? The other one is like social media followers and likes and shares. And I take a very practical approach to this. And at the end of the day, you're spending money to get people to sign up for your services. And that's kind of the initial KPI I work from. So, 10,000 people can view your website, but if no one's calling you, it really doesn't matter.
Right. Interesting. Why do you think those surface level numbers end up driving decisions inside a firm? Even when, as you said, they don't necessarily connect to actual cases or contracts.
I think it's because they're very easy to understand and they're generally increasing, right? It's an agency can put a chart in front of you showing traffic trending the right way, up a little bit every single month, or you can talk to seasonality in terms of why it fluctuates. But a lot of times, nobody wants to be the person in the room and says, wait, are we actually getting more clients or are we just getting more traffic, right? It can be that kind of uncomfortable question the law firm has to ask their agency.
I talk with a lot of attorneys, and I know you do as well. And any human just likes to not look dumb,
Right.
Yeah. And I think highly educated folks like attorneys, doctors, it can be hard to admit that they don't know. It is interesting to the human. It's just a human element, right? Ask. There's no stupid questions almost,
Right.
What have you seen in terms of changes that happen when a firm starts focusing on outcomes instead of, activity? The numbers are going up. How does that shift show up in their decision making?
I mean, everything shifts once they start focusing on the right metrics. And those metrics might vary from firm to firm based on their goals. But when a firm starts asking, how many qualified leads did we get? How many qualified consults did we get? How many signed cases did we get? And working backwards from that, the entire conversation around data and analytics changes. And then you start making decisions based on the data that matters and not just the data that's going up and to the right every month. Marketing decisions also get sharper too. So instead of spending money on just more eyeballs, you start investing in the channels that are actually sending people who are picking up the phone and calling you, and driving those conversations and driving those discussions and hopefully driving those signed cases.
I know that it's going to vary depending on the law firm's goals, but when you're kind of evaluating a firm's marketing performance, what are the first numbers or signals that tell you whether things are seeming to, they're working?
I mean, I really go to 3 data points right from the jump. I look at first-time callers. Every firm you talk to, right, gets all of their good business from word-of-mouth referrals.
Yep.
Or the common, it's just salespeople calling me, or those are just current clients calling me over and over again. So I really love that metric of first-time callers. And then also form submissions. people that are actually taking the time to fill out a form on your landing page or on your website or on any of your social channels. And then I look at cost per signed case, right? Obviously, a firm has to have their intake really dialed in, and their marketing channels really, really structured well to be able to come to that metric. But once you get to a place where you're determining how much did it cost me to sign up that client, you can really start turning the knobs and dials the way you want, in terms of how you're spending and where you're going to bring that business in. I think, if that timeline is kind of long and inconsistent between those data points, your marketing's either attracting the wrong people, or the intake's dropping the ball, or both. But if you have first-time callers and you're keeping track of your cost per signed case, where you can really find if there's a disconnect between the two, and then, like I said, make decisions based on that type of data versus how many people stop by my website, how many times did I show up in a search.
Yeah. Well, I love the idea, and I think of attorneys. Well, first of all, there's no reason they should be expert at this stuff that we're talking about. This is why you exist in the world. But any business professional, super busy, right? And if you want to look at numbers, we can get you numbers, right? Like there's no shortage.
Right.
These days, there's no shortage of data. And so this idea that you just described where, all right, it's like the signal to noise ratio, you hear people call it. It's like,
Right.
yeah, there's 12 things here, but stop with the hand waving. Let's look at these 3-4 things. Now, as a busy executive at an attorney at a law firm, I can be like, okay, that's very clearing. All we need to do is focus on these things and make decisions based on that. That frees up my time. That frees up a lot of headspace, and hopefully gets the needle moving in the right direction. I'm kind of restating the obvious here, maybe, but it's an interesting dynamic because there's so much info out there.
Right. I just think being able to structure what your firm's goals are and then working backwards from that. So not letting, there's, to your point, with how much data there is out there, there can be a lot of chaos to that.
Yeah.
And obviously an agency who wants to retain your business is going to talk about all the good numbers and maybe even add to that chaos. If I'm a law firm owner, a small law firm owner, I really, at the end of the day, what do I need to get from my marketing?
Yeah.
Right. That can be based on your capacity. That can be based on your growth goals, but really determining what the goals are from the firm and then working backward from those goals and then determining what KPIs or what data points make the most sense and going after those.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to take away from website traffic as a KPI, because if it's a new firm, if it's a new entity, or maybe it's a merged firm, website traffic's a data point, but it's not necessarily the silver bullet of success.
Yeah, first time site visitors a data point as well. Like,
right,
perhaps not an invalid, not a worthless thing, for sure. What about, in your experience, what does it look like inside a firm that maybe is relying on the wrong metrics to guide their strategy? What have you seen? Because I'm assuming you come in and you're like, oh, I see what you've been doing here. No wonder,
I come back to that word of chaos, right? There's just a ton of chaos to it. The attorney's frustrated because they feel like they're spending money on marketing. It's checking the box. We need to spend money on marketing. And they're not seeing those results, but they can't put their finger on it. The agency keeps showing up the reports full of data that looks great, but there's this huge disconnect between what success looks like, what I'm spending, and what I'm getting. And the biggest thing, and nobody wants to talk about intake, right? That's the biggest disconnect in all of this is, are your intake practices and structured and policies airtight? Right, a great marketing agency can make a law firm's phone ring, but if there's no one there to answer it, or if it's not answered effectively, or if they're not taken care of, right, there's a lot of different law firms to choose from. I didn't get a good vibe, I didn't get a feel, maybe they didn't pick up. I just click the next call and call the next law firm.
Yeah.
So that's really where the disconnect comes. Like the one thing an agency simply can't solve or fix completely for a law firm is how the phones are answered and how form submissions are followed up. I mean, there's a lot of tools, especially with AI intake and outsourced opportunities that help close that gap, and that's very trackable. But at the end of the day, if a firm doesn't have an airtight intake process, right, it really, none of the other metrics even really matter.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of fascinated by this. I had a conversation in a previous episode with Miles about intake process and that just the human, we're talking about data and AI and yada 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 and clicks and bells and whistles, but at the end of the day, hello, thank you for calling, O'Connor Partners,
Right.
and so that human aspect. I'm wondering, how do firms connect their marketing data, their marketing, spend data to what's actually happening during intake so that they're measuring real outcomes instead of just, like lead volume. Again, we're back to like just traffic almost, right? How do they do that? You talk about making it airtight. What does that look like?
I mean, coming up with a process, of what good intake looks like. I mean, and agencies should be able to help a law firm come up with some idea on what good intake should look like. Asking the right questions, asking the questions that matter. For a family law firm, for instance, asking some of those questions about, do you own a house? Do you have a 401k? Kind of doing some qualifying of the lead as it's coming in the door. One, you're making the client feel like they're taken care of, but two, you're also processing, is this a good lead for us? Is this a good opportunity? Asking the question, how did you hear about us? How did you find us? A lot of times they might just say Google, which from an agency perspective isn't always perfect, but we know that it was an organic lead. Or, a law firm thinks they're getting all this referral business from other attorneys, and maybe they're not getting any from the attorneys that they think they are, and they're coming from completely different sources, so they can take care of the referral partners too. But perfect scenario, a law firm has a mission statement and a value statement, and that kind of transcends everything about that client journey, starting with intake. Intake, just, it's the first touch the law firm has with the potential client, and the old saying of, it's hard to make a first impression twice. And if that person doesn't feel like they're taken care of, they just call the next one.
Oh, and and this is maybe bias because I'm sure it's bias because I'm saying it, but but I'm out in the world a lot, and I'm interacting with customer service people, and I work in professional services myself, and I'm hosting this podcast, and my thinking too is, you were talking about qualifying the lead coming in. Do you own a home? Do you own a 401k? It's not all money grab. I don't mean it that way, but like you want a good, in some ways, a bigger case, with assets and money, and it's going to be a meaty case to dig into and hopefully be profitable. And so the kind of person who's calling in that has that kind of status in the world, so to speak, are probably going to be even more judgmental about the experience they're having with the human on the other end. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that
okay,
that level of
that doesn't sound like the kind of law firm I want to do business with, because the person who answered the phone and asked me questions didn't seem to really be, it was just like generic or whatever it might be, that experience, that user experience matters.
Well, that goes back to something you said earlier about just that human element.
Yeah.
Right. You have to, again, intake for me is every conversation we have with our clients as an agency will come back to intake at some point. Even in the sales process with some of these firms, I often ask, tell me about your intake practice, right? At the end of the day, I can make your phone ring and you're going to spend a bunch of money, but if you're not answering the phone effectively, none of this really matters. But that human element and putting someone behind the telephone that cares,
Yeah.
and is willing to pick up the phone and take care of that client, and lives those values and the mission statement of the firm and understand that this is the client journey starts right here for the person, the first time the person calls, and even deeper is that person may not hire you, but even if they had a good experience with that initial intake process, you get referrals out of that. You can get good positive reviews out of that.
Oh, yeah.
Just out of simply taking time to answer the questions and be human and personal.
Well, the reality, the reality is the bar can be pretty low out there in the worlds of customer service. And so
100%.
So not that hard to beat is my point,
Right. It is a low bar, right? The number of times I call a law firm and they pick up the phone and say law office, like, well, which one? I've called 7 today. I don't know which one.
I love that. Yeah. Restaurant.
Right. Right. Like, oh, okay. I feel like I've stressed it enough on this podcast, but man, that intake process is just so crucial to the success of a firm.
Yeah. Well, and I've had that conversation with clients in many different industries around like their website, if you will, right? Your website is your company at the moment that I interact with it. So if it's glitchy, if it's confusing, if it's hard to find the information I need, that's what your company's like. And so absolutely the same when I call your hotline and I'm put on hold for an endless amount of time. Yeah. If it's not helping, it's hurting, right?
Right.
So let's practically just a couple of minutes we have left here, Steve. People listening out there, and they're like, "Oh my God, this, I'm loving this information." If a law firm right now wants a clearer picture of performance for this month or last month, they're like, "Hey, let's do an audit." What's one specific or a couple of numbers or patterns that would immediately tell them something needs to change? Like, say, "Hey, we're thinking about doing something different. Let's look at what's going on right now." What should they be looking at?
I think they should be looking at their current caseload and where those people came from, and kind of going back to what success looks like. Like if I know that I've got 3 really good cases, I kind of want to determine how those people found us and how can I replicate that. And maybe it was a marketing channel, maybe it was a referral source, maybe it was a speaking engagement. But go back to where are you getting your best clients from, and then how do we leverage the tools we have to find more of those? Mm-hmm. I do think like that. The one specific thing any firm can look at, and it takes time, and you have to dive in, is really that cost per signed case.
Right.
If I look at, I've got 10 cases this month that I've signed, and I'm spending $5,000 a month. My cost per case is pretty easy to determine. Do I have capacity to do more of that? And what investment am I looking at to get to that point? But either you're spending more time to reach worse leads or you're losing people somewhere in the intake. But I'd rather have a firm just tracking that one number. Like, what is the cost per signed case? Instead of kind of drowning in that dashboard of traffic and leads and website visits and, just come back to that one number and let's build from there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's great. That's great. I love, and again, you're busy. The people listening, everybody, busy. It's like, okay, just focus on this one thing, and then and go from there. Wow.
Yeah. I can't remember. I think it was from Caddyshack where they said washing machines work hard too. Right. Let's make sure you're doing the work that's important to you, that's meaningful to you, that makes you money. Like whatever that looks like for you. Yeah. Right. We're all busy. Let's make sure you're busy with the right stuff.
Absolutely. Well, hey Steve, we're out of time, and but. A great conversation. Thanks for sharing your expertise, your point of view. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. I appreciate it. I enjoyed it.
That's it for today's episode of Legal Marketing Happy Hour. If your firm is overwhelmed with marketing data but still unsure what's actually driving results, it might be time to refocus on the metrics that truly matter, which obviously is what we were just talking about. So if you want to learn more, connect with Steve and the team, visit the website abovethebarmarketing.com. And don't forget, leave a review, some thumbs up, maybe subscribe to the show so you don't miss an episode. Really appreciate that. I'm Sean O'Connor. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.